I thought I'd start with a definition of creativity and then throw it away, because it's always a good idea to say, what do we mean by creativity? It means different things to different people. And this is actually from Wikipedia, which means I don't have to pay any copyright fees for using it. Wikipedia says it's a mental and a social process involving the generation of new ideas and concepts, or new associations of the creative mind. Notice talk about not just concept, but mental and social concepts. And then there's this idea that creativity is fueled either by something that you do consciously or unconsciously. And then there are those who say that's too fancy, it's actually just about doing something new. Okay? And then some other definitions. How many of you have heard of Clayton Christensen from Harvard Business School? Okay, Clayton's written quite a lot of books about disruptive technology, creativity, etc. And so it's always interesting to see what other people say. Right? And he just describes it, he then brings in the idea of a disruptive technology. So what he's saying is that lots of technologies, if you're really trying to be creative, change things, the idea of disruption is very, very important. Okay? So he talks about disruptive technology, disruptive innovation, and he defines that as basically something that changes things. And his definition says you improve a product or a service, or you design it for a different set of customers. And I've added, or doing something very differently. Okay? You won't find that in his definition, but I did that because I think that's important. And then this is a simplification of Clayton Christensen's view, which is he says that you have on one axis you have a performance of something you're trying to do in time on the other axis, and he defines this nebulous term of low quality use, medium quality use, high quality use. How many of you have read, you're probably far too young to be aware of this book, but have you heard of a book called Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance? Robert Pirsig. There's a classic literary text. And in that book, he says he sets out in the search to understand the meaning of the word quality. What is quality? And he still hasn't answered it. He had a nervous breakdown after he wrote the first book, didn't write anything for 20 years, and then wrote a subsequent book of philosophical inquiry. And he talks about how quality and the perception of change and values is really part of the creative process. And there are some wonderful anecdotes. If you get a chance to read it, I'll have to repeat one for you. He goes to an Indian reservation, an North American Indian reservation, and he says to this woman there, what sort of dog is that? Because he sees his dog wandering around. And the woman says, it's a good dog. And he says, no, what kind of dog is it? And she says, no, it's a good dog. And what he's trying to show is that our perception of classification and quality, as far as this woman is concerned, the fact that it was good was much more important than the kind of breed it was or whatever else. And it's all about perception. Okay? So here's a simplified view. And then really we start to get much more practical, which is, so how does creativity manifest itself in terms of the subject of our talk today, in terms of technology? What does it actually mean? It means you can use technology to create a new product or a service. You're doing something new. Examples that abound. So, for example, the iPhone from Apple. Very little of that technology that actually sat in that wasn't already available. But the way it was applied to create a novel product was important. The second way in which is very important in the context that we're talking about today is that the technology changes the way in which a product is bought or sold or provided. So it may be the same thing, but you're delivering it to people in a very different way. And a good example of that would be software. Until about 5-7 years ago, the predominant model for the way you bought software was you paid a software license, you installed a new machine, you run it. Today, if you look, we have things called software as a service, rental models. You pay a subscription to use software for a period of time. That changes so many things. It's dramatically going to reorder the software industry. Not because the core product has changed, but because of the way it's being sold or delivered to customers. And then the third is really the way in which which the services, distribution channels, how it's bought, sold, delivered into people. Distribution channel really defines the way in which the product goes from the factory to the customer. So if I give you another example of that, you look at mobile phones. When mobile phones were first launched, you went and bought a mobile phone from a shop. You paid £400 for it, or more, I remember we designed the first mobile phone, a PA, in 1986, and it was the size of a brick. And, it wasn't mobile at all. And then you probably remember the cartoons from 1989, 1990. There were people in the city would go around with this great big mobile phone held to their ears, and it was like a badge of achievement. And you think what we have today. But that mobile phone, the old model, was you went and bought one, and then you got to connect it to your network. What's the model today of distribution? You basically sign up with Orange or whatever else, or you walk into a retail shop and they'll give you the phone, and you either buy a prepaid SIM card. The entire distribution has changed. And so instead of these phones reaching you through retail outlets in this way, they arrive with couriers to your door with a SIM card, and you phone up a number or activate them. So the distribution models have changed. That changed the economics of the whole system. So creativity, doesn't just have to be in the way a product's created. It can be in the way it's sold, how it's paid for, or how it actually is delivered and used by people. Okay, so what I'm going to do is talk about two case studies, and they're different examples, and I'll just spend 2 minutes explaining each of those case studies and talking about the difference. So the first one is a company called Design Force, and so if I kind of declare my colors, I'm actually chairman of this company now, and I was involved in its creation over the last 3.5 years. What it's done is, the idea is to change the way in which engineering designers design products, from simple to complex things. Everything from an aircraft blade to a car to a new pencil. Okay, and we'll talk about how novel models, and novel distribution channels are changing that. It's very high end, so it's about stuff that might be used by people like Rolls-Royce or aerospace designers, very high tech. It's the kind of thing that Cambridge University professors, the Whittle Lab and others wouldn't turn their nose up at. They would say, oh, this is great, this is real high tech stuff. The second example is right at the other end of the spectrum, and that has also had Cambridge involvement. And that's really a very interesting development of a low-cost product for food chilling. And the phrase bottom of the pyramid you see up there, bottom of the pyramid is a term that Clayton Christensen uses, but it's very, very popular in the developing world. You can't go around India today without talking to anybody in strategic or commercial terms without them mentioning BOP, bottom of the pyramid. And the idea is to bring technology-driven innovations to the masses rather than the very narrow middle-class elites. And same is true across swathes of Africa, Mexico, everywhere else. And the paradox, of course, which is not a paradox if you understand the way creativity works, is many of these products and services are then coming back into European markets because of changing conditions. So the Nano, which was designed for a low-cost environment for the Indian market, is now going to be sold in Europe and will probably do very well. Okay? So, and the second example is actually the company is Godrej. And those of you with any Indian background will know Godrej is a very large white goods manufacturer in Asia Pac based out of India. And they do everything from refrigerators to safes, to cupboards, to locks, to furniture. And this is a very, very new product for them. But historically, most of their products have been bought by the middle classes in India because of the cost point. Okay, so those are the two things we're going to talk about. And for those of you who like to go and read up a bit more about the stuff, innovation and creativity is a diffusion process. Have they heard from Jack Lang, this group? Okay, well, Jack goes on ad infinitum about diffusion, innovation being a diffusion process. It's his great passion. But the whole theory of diffusion, which follows the bell curve, was described by Everett Rogers in 1962. And that's an interesting read by way of background if you're interested in the field. The other thing to read about is Geoffrey Moore's book, which talks about crossing the chasm, which is the chasm going from early adopters of new technology products to mass markets. And that's quite interesting. And then there's some work that I've been doing with some people to say there's more than one chasm based on our practical experience of building businesses. There are two earlier chasms in taking technology ideas into prototypes and then turning them into early products before you go to mass markets. Okay, so that's the end of the background, and so if you thought that was theoretic, that's theory as far as I'm concerned for today.